Hello there, IELTS students. Welcome to IELTS Podcast. You no longer have to worry, fret or panic about IELTS because we are here to guide you through this test jungle. Enjoy these IELTS tutorials, and if you need more help or want to access the famous online course, you can visit us at IELTSPodcast.com.
Hello IELTS podcast listeners, my name is Daphne. Thank you for tuning into this podcast, and in this podcast today we are going to be talking about vocabulary. We are particularly going to look at IELTS speaking vocabulary about food and nutrition. So in this podcast we are going to look at some collocations. These are words which naturally go together. A very important part of improving your vocabulary is understanding collocations. And we're going to go through a whole section of possible questions on food and nutrition, starting with the part 1 questions, looking at a part 2 cue card, and then looking at some part 3 more detailed questions. So my name's Daphne, IELTS Podcast. I started teaching about 8 years ago in England, and teaching general English, and then getting into IELTS and realizing how difficult IELTS is, what a challenging exam it is, and how you need to specialize. And if you're going to learn to teach this exam, and if you're going to teach successfully and guide your students to success, the most important thing you can do is really understand what is needed. So I've worked especially on IELTS writing, but also do a lot of work with students on speaking, really trying to build confidence. It's very frightening if you're not used to speaking a foreign language in front of anyone, to be there in front of an examiner having to speak in English on some very difficult topics with very little time to prepare. Speaking in any foreign language is challenging. I know that from my own language learning experience, so I have a lot of sympathy when you're in that position of having to talk about something you may not feel that confident about. On our speaking confidence course, by the way, just to quickly mention that, we talk a lot about fluency, how you can keep going, how you can keep talking even when you think you have nothing to say, and how we can give you that confidence. Understand why it's difficult to sometimes keep going, and reset your mind, reset your confidence. We also always have a look at pronunciation issues, because for some different languages, some of the sounds in English are really hard. So it is worth, as much as you can, I'd recommend this as a tip, tuning into the radio in English, tuning into TV in English, but really listening to the sounds that people make and try and practice those sounds. You may feel a bit strange, but go to the bathroom and shut the door and look in a mirror and just use your mouth to make these sounds that we make in English, and that will just give you more confidence. We're going to talk a bit later about how to add value as well. One of the things we're going to look at here is vocabulary. Okay, this is about vocabulary, food and nutrition. So I would pause this now, go and get a pen, go and get your notebook. I'm going to give you loads of vocabulary today, and the best way you can learn it is to write it down immediately. And then here's a really important bit of advice or top tip: use the vocabulary. So you're thinking, how can I use this vocabulary? This is silly. But use it by talking to your colleagues at work. Use it by practicing with family and friends if you can. Ask them questions. Ask them the same questions that we're going to look at today, and write down their responses, and then see how you would respond. Get them to ask you questions so you can practice hearing your own answer. Okay, so IELTS speaking vocabulary about food and nutrition. So food is an everyday part of our lives, which is why it comes up very often in the speaking exam. And to prepare, we're going to recommend you practice using words and phrases related to food. Where you can use these questions and use the answers to show you some of these amazing vocabulary ideas. So I talked about collocations. Now, collocations are words which naturally go together in English. and you're going to hear me use a lot of them today. For example, home-cooked meals, homemade food, junk food, packed with vitamins, refined carbohydrates, seasonal fruits, fresh vegetables. These are naturally two words which stick together, and English people expect to hear them together. So if they don't go together, it sounds wrong to us, and that's a very important thing to understand. That's why you sometimes get picked up on those words or corrected on those phrases if they're not absolutely accurate. So let's get into an example of some IELTS Part 1 speaking questions to do with food and nutrition. So the examiner is there saying to you, for example, what food do you like to eat? Remember, the Part 1 is more relaxed. The examiner is just trying to make you feel comfortable, make you feel not so nervous. So these questions are relatively easy. That being said, don't miss the opportunity to show as much vocabulary as you can. Every sentence that you show is the possibility to score marks. Okay, what food do you like to eat? I'm not a fussy eater. As long as you don't feed me rabbit food, I'm easy to please. Okay, collocations there, fussy eater. And as long as you don't feed me rabbit food. Now, rabbit food, you can hear me laughing. What do you think rabbit food is? I'm not literally talking about food I would give to my pet rabbit. I'm talking about lettuce or carrots or green salad. A lot of people love that sort of food, but a lot of people don't. So in this answer, you can see this person doesn't. As long as you don't feed me rabbit food, I'm easy to please. My flatmate and I share the cooking chores. Once a week, we make a slap-up meal of steak and chips covered in a rich sauce. And to satisfy my sweet tooth, we finish off with a decadent chocolate pudding. Well, that sounds amazing. So a slap-up meal, this is a large treat, like a really delicious meal. And they're having steak and chips and then covered in a rich sauce. And a sweet tooth, as you can guess, indicates that you like eating the desserts. And we finish off with a decadent chocolate pudding. So in that one little answer, there's a lot of extra information and a little example in there and some great vocabulary. Examiner. So do you enjoy cooking? I prefer eating to cooking. I made good use of ready meals in lockdown, and I'm not adverse to junk food or the occasional pub lunch. I realise, though, that it's necessary to include nutritious food in my diet, which is why I cook several times a week. So there's the example there of ready meals, but also junk food. I'm not adverse to junk food or the occasional pub lunch. I realise, though, it's necessary to include nutritious food. You could add such as fresh vegetables and seasonal fruit in my diet, which is why I cook several times a week. What's your favourite meal of the day? I'm a breakfast fan. I wake up starving hungry after a good night's sleep. We often say this in English, I'm starving hungry. We're not literally starving, thankfully, but it means I'm very hungry. I have a good appetite. I wake up starving hungry after a good night's sleep. I like nothing better than a good English breakfast of bacon, eggs, buttery toast, along with a piping hot cup of coffee. An English breakfast, if you've ever visited the UK, you will know this English breakfast tradition, which is bacon, eggs, toast, sometimes mushrooms, sometimes tomatoes. It's a huge meal for breakfast. And then we have either piping hot, this one says piping hot cup of coffee. That's difficult to say. Piping hot cup of coffee or a lot of tea. We sometimes say washed down with tea because that implies that you're drinking a lot of tea. So you've got some lovely vocabulary in there. Go back to that section, write down some of that vocab. Think about how you could be using that. The part 2 speaking question here. So the cue card says, describe a favourite restaurant. You should say, the restaurant you like best, why you like it, and the occasions when. why you like it, and the occasions when you go there. So let's look at a really good answer on that one. I enjoy fine dining and exotic food. Both are available at my favourite restaurant in the centre of town. On special occasions, I take my partner wining and dining. We love the ambiance of a candlelit dinners and the extensive menu of mouth-watering meals. Okay, let's just break that down a bit. Let's have a look first at the vocabulary. So I enjoy fine dining and exotic food. So fine dining is absolutely the opposite of a fast food restaurant or a burger chain. Fine dining is luxury, suggesting something very special, maybe with white tablecloths and lots of waiters, and you dress up to go there. Exotic food. So both are available at my favourite restaurant in the centre of town. So I'm saying where it is. On special occasions, so I'm telling the examiner when. Remember, I'm answering all the parts here of the question. Then I'm going to go into some detail, obviously. I take my partner wining and dining. We love the ambiance of a candlelit dinners and extensive menu of mouth-watering meals. So I've used a lot of lovely vocab in there. Wining and dining, candlelit dinners, mouth-watering meals. Remember when the cue card says describe something, adjectives are your friend here. Adjectives are a really powerful part of the English language, a really great way to score high on Lexis. This is 25% of the marks here. Show the examiner your great vocabulary. Remember, it is a language exam. You're not being examined on your ability to cook. Thank goodness. For me, that would be disastrous. But I am being examined on my language. So I want to show the examiner the best language I have. So I'm going to start to describe some of the amazing food there. The menu includes starters, mains, desserts. Usually by the time we get there, I'm dying of hunger. This is like starving hungry. So we order a starter to carve the hunger pangs. If it's a treat, we often share a bottle of bubbly. It is, after all, a celebration venue. After finishing our starter, we take time savouring the food. Now, there's great vocab in there. We've got this dying of hunger, idiomatic, which is quite nice to put in the speaking. Luckily, not literal, but an idiom there. Calm the hunger pangs. A hunger pang. Sometimes if you haven't eaten all day, you have like a pain in your stomach. That is a hunger pang. We share a bottle of bubbly. This can be something fizzy as a celebration. After we finished our starter, we take time savouring the food. Now, what I'm going to do now is add value. At the beginning, I mentioned I'd share some tips with you on how to add value. Here, I'm going to use a conditional. So I want to get maximum marks, not just for vocabulary here, but for grammar as well. So I'm going to throw in a conditional. The last time I went there, I had oysters. If I'd been offered oysters as a child, I would never have said yes. But now they're a firm favourite. And in this restaurant, they're a speciality. So if you spotted that, there was a third conditional. We don't use them very often. They're quite hard to use in grammar. It's a difficult structure, but it's really worth mastering. If you can master that, then you'll be getting maximum score on grammar. Great skill to add that in. If I'd been offered oysters as a child, I would never have said yes. But now they're a firm favourite and a speciality of the restaurant. So speciality, something that the restaurant does well. This is not the type of restaurant where you'd ask for a doggy bag, so we waste nothing. We end the evening with a delicious meal. After settling the bill, we head off home, satisfied that we've enjoyed a scrumptious meal. So a doggy bag, sometimes in restaurants, if you can't eat everything, they put some food in a box for you. It's not really for my dog. It's for me. I can take it to work and have it for lunch the next day. But we call it a doggy bag. I think it's an American term. Maybe the idea was that they would give the dog some of the bones or some of the meat at the end. And in some places it's quite common. We end the evening with a delicious dessert. I want to add another bit of value in there, talking about grammar. And I'm going to use a concession clause. Concession beginning with although. Although I really love cake and I shouldn't have had a dessert, I knew that I couldn't resist it. Although I really love cake and I shouldn't have had a dessert, I knew I couldn't resist it. So write down that sentence if you want to replay it. Some really, really lovely grammar in there. And the idea of concession, I know it's bad, but I still did it because this is a special occasion. Okay? I couldn't resist the temptation. That's another expression that you can use when we're talking about food, which is great. So we ended the meal with a delicious dessert. After settling the bill, we headed off home, satisfied we enjoyed a scrumptious meal. So there's a lot of detail in there. There's a lot of examples. I'm explaining some of the actual food we ate. So I'm fully answering that question. Obviously, you can talk more about the kind of food we had. I'm going to add another sentence in here. Last time we visited, the specials on the menu were a whole grilled fish or an open fire barbecue steak, which both looked appetizing. So there I'm giving some more examples of food, but I'm using really lovely language. We're talking about specials on the menu, we're talking about a grilled fish or an open fire barbecue. So really showing the examiner that I'm very confident talking about this subject. Now, I am quite a foodie. You probably guessed this by now. I'm quite a foodie. I really enjoy eating out. I try cooking. I'm not that good, but I am a foodie. So that's the kind of, it's also something else that you could be saying there. Let's look at the part 3 questions. Now, I always think there's a really big connection between the part 3 questions and the part 2, the task 2 essay writing questions. So there's a big connection between these. You're really getting into the technical academic vocabulary here. You're getting into the technical grammar. You're showing as much as you possibly can. These are questions which are more global, asking you for an opinion, asking you for some really good content here. So for example, examiner, do you believe the 20th century diet is a healthy one? Far too many people in the world today are overweight, and obesity is an enormous problem. I believe that where possible, people should cut down on sugars and refined carbohydrates and replace them with leafy vegetables and seasonal fruits. A balanced diet would help everyone to regulate their weight and put less pressure on the health services. So I'm giving a lot of detail on that answer. That could be an essay question. And then I'm kind of almost going into my introduction. What would I be discussing in that essay? I talked about concession earlier, and we can use concession again here as well. There is no doubt that there are problems in the world connected to obesity. So that's using a probability. I'm expressing doubt. There's no doubt that there are problems in the world connected to obesity. Here's the concession. Although processed foods can be cheap and convenient, that's my concession. Although processed foods can be cheap and convenient, comma, they should be limited. So something like that, if you listen to that, I'm using probability, so I'm expressing this idea of doubt, and I'm using concession as well. Here's another possible part 3. So part 3, you probably have 3 or 4 questions. Starvation is a problem in many parts of the world. What do you think should be done about it? From what I've read, current global food production could cover the daily consumption needs of the world. We need to find a way to economically transport food to where it's most needed or find alternative food sources. Nobody should starve when there's no shortage of food. So that's a really good answer with some great collocations in there. I wonder if you spotted them. Global food production can cover the daily consumption needs. Economically transport it. Find alternative food sources. And then my kind of recommendation comment at the end. Nobody should starve when there's no shortage of food. So these are really great examples of collocations that we can use here, speaking part 3, and also quite frequently in the task 2 writing. Make a note of those. Look out for those phrases when you're reading a newspaper or when you're listening to the radio. The more you make a connection between what you've heard here and what you hear elsewhere in your daily practice on English, the more these things will stay in your brain. You're building an awareness. You're noticing the language. That's the best way to learn it. Get it into your daily vocabulary. So last question here. In homes where both parents work, do you think cooking has just become another job at the end of the day? I know food preparation can be time consuming, but if everyone helps with ideas and recipes and everyone takes a turn and lends a hand, cooking can be fun for the family. Home-cooked meals are often healthier and packed with vitamins. So there's a really good, again, more language in there. Food preparation can be time consuming, but if everyone helps and takes a turn and lends a hand, cooking can be fun for the family. Home-cooked meals are often healthier and packed with vitamins. I could add also something that protecting traditional family recipes helps the family to bond. Protecting family recipes helps a family to bond, sharing recipes and eating a meal together. So there's lots and lots of vocabulary connected to this. It is a great topic. I think I'd feel very happy if I had this topic. We've looked at some really good vocabulary, haven't we here? Really good vocabulary. We've talked about packed with vitamins. We've talked about rabbit food, if you can remember what that is. We've talked about food production. We've talked about wining and dining, savouring food. We've talked about nutritious food. And we've talked about being starving hungry and obviously English breakfasts. So if you're struggling with your IELTS preparation, if you want some more help, the best thing to do is sign up to the newsletter. In the newsletter, you will have lots of examples of what we do, lots of special offers. We'll talk to you about the courses we do. Remember here I've talked about the Speaking Confidence course, which will help you become more fluent, help you get more confident. Obviously, we do our amazing essay writing course and the Jump to Band 7, or it's free. So good that there is a guarantee on this. We will get you to your Band 7 on the speaking, on the writing, on the reading, on the listening. You can do it and we can help you. Send us an essay to get some feedback. Feedback is the best way to improve. We can tell you what's going wrong. We can tell you what to look out for. Thank you very much for listening today. Share this podcast with your IELTS friends who are also preparing. I'm Daphne. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.